FIFA, or Michelle as she's known to her mates in the film world, is truly one of the powerhouse franchises of all time. Now we're approaching the launch of the last instalment in the FIFA franchise, and it's not through a lack of success, but because Electronic Arts and FIFA themselves have finally reached the zenith of greedy capitalist machinations and have sulked their way home alone to their gilded mansions. Yes, the money-loving affair has come to an end, with both parties taking their Giuliani ball home. FIFA Road to World Cup 98 was without question the peak of the PS1 era set of games, and indeed is seen by many as the best of the entire long lineage of Carlos kickaballery. Kotaku, in a 2021 article, even declared it as the very best sports game of all time. Strong words indeed, in a world where many a connoisseur of football games would argue that one of the sensible soccers, or one of the Pro Evolution soccers, are better than any of Electronic Arts' soccer instalments. With that said, FIFA Road to World Cup 98 is a superlative effort by anyone's standards of the era. Its two predecessors were butt-ugly harridans, with easy goal scoring and clunky gameplay. FIFA Road to the World Cup 98 had a sparkly new engine, unprecedented customisation, the utterly pointless but fun indoor soccer mode, and the most amount of teams to date. Do you want to play through a Malaysian League campaign? Of course not, but you could. Go Sarawak. It also had an incredible amount of FIFA recognised international teams. Sorry, Vatican City, you're not one of those. Go back to the priesthood, footballer. You can use any of these international teams to try and qualify for the World Cup from the very start of the qualification process. Now, the qualification process these days is something that most football fans seem to hate. It interrupts their Premier League scheduling, so they'd rather watch Brentford versus Fulham than, say, I don't know, Slovenia versus Slovakia. I can appreciate that. But yes, you can play as any of the teams from the powerhouses from Europe and South America, along with every team from those forgettable Oceania and Caribbean islands. You get to play as St Kitts and Nevis. That's 2 for 1. All of the teams from the 32-bit versions feature in the 16-bit versions as well. Yes, incredibly, there were 16-bit versions of FIFA Road to World Cup, even though the formats were nearing their death. They were indeed some of the last released for the consoles. So low priority were these titles for Electronic Arts that they were released exclusively in European territories, and programming duties were shipped out away from Electronic Arts Canada, who handled the Saturn, the N64, the Windows and PlayStation 1 versions. The 16-bit versions were joint efforts by Electronic Arts Extended Play Productions, which featured programmers from the very first FIFA International Soccer, and XYZ Productions, who did this and the 16-bit versions of FIFA 97 and nothing else, ever. There was also a Game Boy version, but that's such a dirty little stepchild that EA disowned it completely. They allowed Tiertex to develop it and THQ to publish it. The Game Boy version lost most of the teams, and everything looks like it's a ghost version of soccer played in the afterlife. It probably shouldn't be mentioned in this video, so maybe I'll cut this out. If it's still in, well, you can blame me for wasting even more of your time. Playing the 16-bit versions, or at least having a look at the stat screens, reveals something quite unusual. Most of the stats for the big international teams seem pretty accurate. Current world champions Brazil, who won the trophy in 1994, Euro 96 winners Germany, soon-to-be champs France, and Le Tournoi 97 champions England. Yes, England genuinely won a trophy against world-class opposition in the 1990s. They're all good. They're all good teams. Most of the minnows like San Marino and Vanuatu, they're suitably dire. But some stats seem, well, a little bit too high. Let's have a look at Europe first. Albania, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Estonia, Macedonia, Malta. I'm only halfway here through the European teams, but these all seem very, very high in their statistics. They're not tremendous teams now. Yes, Macedonia and Albania have qualified for tournaments in the last 10 years or so, but they're not world beaters. Back when this game released, though, they really weren't as good as these stats suggest. If you want proof of this, let's have a look at the FIFA rankings from the era. Now, if you don't know what the FIFA rankings are, well, the FIFA rankings are the flawed but ultimately reasonably fair estimation of each country's current standing in world football. These stats are from the same month that the game was published, which was November 1997. In the FIFA World Rankings, Albania are 117th, Armenia are 168th, Azerbaijan are 124th, Estonia 103rd, Georgia 72nd, and Macedonia 86th. Going by the FIFA rankings, these teams should not have stats this high in this game. Some things are not right here. But that's just Europe, and Europe is the home to probably 80% of the world-class international football sides. Heading over to the other powerhouse of world football, to South America now, home of serial champions like Brazil, Uruguay and Argentina. And there's nothing too amiss here. There's not many teams in this federation. Chile, led by the then fearsome pair of Ivan Zamorano and Marcelo Salas, they seem a little bit weak. As do Peru, whereas Paraguay seem maybe a bit too strong. As do Venezuela. At least Paraguay, captained then by legendary goal-scoring keeper and rampant egoist Jose Luis Chilavert, at least they qualified for the 98 World Cup, unlike Venezuela. Africa has a few teams missing, though you'd only really care if you were a hardcore Chad fan. But once again, there are anomalies here in this region. Even the biggest Lamana Trésor Loire fan wouldn't rate the Democratic Republic of Congo as a perfect football team, and he hadn't even played for them yet. Similarly, Mozambique, 151st in the 97 FIFA World Rankings, that's out of 192, probably didn't deserve this statistical glow-up. North America finds Barbados 114th in real life, and the Cayman Islands 164th in real life as perfect teams, better than their actual leaders of quality in the area, those being the United States and Mexico. They're not the only ones to have inflated stats in this area. Other tiny island minnows like Dominican Republic, the Netherlands Antilles and Haiti seem a touch inflated too. Moving over to Asia, and we have the tiny desert island of Bahrain as potential World Cup winners according to these stats. Along with fellow international behemoths like Kuwait, Lebanon, Iraq, our next World Cup hosts Qatar, the Maldives, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, Tajikistan, the United Arab Emirates, the Yemen and Vietnam, overshadowing the continent's true quality teams like Saudi Arabia, Japan, Iran and South Korea. Weird, Finally, we have the true acid test for this, that being Oceania, a federation so piss-poor weak that its best team, the decidedly average Australia, left to go and play in Asia. So they would get at least a modicum of actual competition after getting silly results like 31-0 against American Samoa in 2002. American Samoa must have handed in a sick note as they're not present. Maybe they even forgot their kit. However, teams like New Zealand are in this and are handed dead poor stats despite being the second best team in that division at the time. They're still not very good, but they are a damn sight better than the Solomon Islands, Western Samoa, and especially the Cook Islands, who in real life did not have anything like the players required for these statistics in this game. I mean, they were the second worst team in the FIFA rankings of 1997, 191st out of 192 teams. Do these bogus statistics affect club teams too? A little bit, yes. Looking at the Premier League table of 1997 and 1998, the one in real life, you might be surprised to see that Barnsley are so strong when compared to Sam Allardyce's Bolton. But there's nothing quite as egregious as the statistics of the international teams. So do these statistical anomalies affect the N64 and PlayStation 1 versions, seeing as they were handled by a different team at EA Canada? There are a few anomalies that I'd question, yes. I wouldn't say that Newcastle were a better team than Man United in 1997 and 98. But there's nothing quite as standout strange as the Cook Islands being as good as Brazil. It does appear to be an issue restricted entirely to the 16-bit efforts, in my opinion, these poor little late-stage afterthoughts. It was at this point I decided I was going to try a little experiment. Well, I say a little experiment, it was quite the grand experiment. I was going to do a World Cup. No, 4 World Cups. One on each of the PlayStation 1, N64, Super Nintendo and Mega Drive versions. Exactly the same teams in exactly the same rounds, but just to see if the results bore out how good the stats were for these teams. The way I was going to do this was that I would take the 16 best teams on the November 1997 FIFA rankings and put them against the 16 most overrated teams in the 16-bit versions of FIFA. I put a fair amount of effort into it. I did a spinny wheel thing to determine the groups, and I was really looking forward to an anomaly like Aruba playing France in a semi-final, or the World Cup closer being contested by the Cayman Islands and Bahrain. The plan was to set up the matches and let the computer play itself and decide who would win, with no interaction from me at all. I wanted it to be a pure experiment. But then I realised a couple of things. This version of FIFA didn't let you play out a simulated World Cup finals, as in the last 32 teams. So I'd have to sit there and painstakingly watch the computer play out 64 friendly matches while making notes, 4 times over. That would be 256 matches. No, I'm not going to watch an old computer game play itself 256 times. And then I realised that I could just let it play a couple of games on each format to see if the experiment would even work. Each time on the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive, the traditional superpowers would trounce their counterparts even if the minnows had better stats than the teams that they were playing against. There was a 5-0 to England against Mozambique, a 3-0 tonking of Iraq by Russia, a 6-1 in a tussle twixt Brazil and the fabled and fearsome Cook Islands. So at half-time on the games, I started to look at the player stats, and the likes of Ronaldo and Shearer et al. Would be high. They would be in the 90s, as they are in real life. I don't know if they have stats in real life, but they are pretty good players. Whereas the stats on the minnows, they were poor. I mean, this poor bugger playing for Mozambique with his very lowly stats here, He's on such a low wage when compared to those prima donnas in the Premiership that he can't even afford a surname. Poor old F. Bloody Steve McManaman, can't you lend him one of the man sections of your name, you bloody rich fop? There didn't seem a lot of point then in playing a World Cup at this point, let alone 4 of them. So what was going on with these statistical graphs? I don't bloody know. I trawled the net looking for articles about the 16-bit versions of FIFA Road to the World Cup, but there's so little interest in these European-only half-assed efforts, released right as Sega and Nintendo were going to take their respective early 90s consoles for their final car ride to the vets, as they lay whimpering in the back seat. And you know what? I didn't find anything at all about it. It literally looks, and I'm just guessing here, like they rushed it out of the door with whatever stats they had left in the stat bucket at 4:55 on a Friday afternoon. So, yeah, I've got nothing to say about it now. Were you expecting a great revelation? Me too. Were you expecting a hilarious video with the captain of Tajikistan lofting the greatest prize in world sport on the Mega Drive? Me too. But the crushing reality is this. As an England fan, I've come used to disappointment after a lot of hype. And after doing all this stat gathering and sitting through the computer playing multiple games of FIFA, I sure as hell wasn't going to not put this video out. Because yes, as I said, I'm an England fan. I remember Gaza missing the ball by millimetres in that epic Euro 96 semi-final. The disallowed Sol Campbell goal in 1998. That gaff by Seaman against Brazil in 2002 when they were down to 10 men. The constant penalty heartaches throughout most of the 2000s and even latterly of the 2010s and 20s. That Lampard goal in 2010 against Germany that probably wouldn't have mattered anyway. Or even the daring to hope that I felt when Trippier scored in the semi-final in 2018 against Croatia and Luke Shaw netted in that fateful night at Wembley in 2021. All ended in crushing disappointment. It is a feeling of emptiness, of excitement to then nothing. But it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And today, what have we learned? We've learned that I've whittled on about a bunch of meaningless stats in a pair of afterthought versions of a yearly sports franchise. So maybe the journey thing is a really poor analogy. Yeah, sorry. What a bummer to end this video on. It was a bummer of a video, wasn't it? Sorry again. Like, I guess. Subscribe to this nothingness. Okay, thanks, bye. Probably won't be doing this again.